His hand brushed the hilt of his sword almost thoughtlessly. That's new and disturbing. Hook really is out of control. Peter may be a nuisance at times, but he's no blackguard. At times he has done even favors for us. All right, Tinkerbell and Madame. Miss, Wendy interrupted, but you can call me Wendy. Wendy, then, although it is a meaningless name, he said, bowing. Better you were named Wendy, Mistress of the Winds. And what in blazes happened to you? Since I last caught sight of you, I saw you hiding in the bushes. It looks like you've been through hell. She helped me to escape a trap of the first, Tinkerbell said, and fought off an entirely colony of thistles. Wendy was gratified to see his honey brown eyes widen in surprise. I knew you had the bearing of a warrior, but the first captured you, and you escaped? Truly? Wendy gave a slightly ironic curtsy. Aw, quit all your palaver and chit-chat, Peter moaned. His complexion had brightened a little, and his whole countenance had improved. Whether it was the ruby fruit moving to the jungle, something finally happening, or all three, it was hard to say. What did my boys come? Is there any sign of them yet? They should be here soon, Tinkerbell promised, Flutter, to soothe him. She made a little jingly cooing noises. Thorn then sighed and looked at Wendy. What can you do? Wendy couldn't help smiling. She didn't feel like betraying her friend. The boy fairy wasn't snarky or obnoxious, more resigned, like a big brother. And she was relieved to see someone share her feelings about Tinkerbell's obsessive relationship with Peter. Did you know there's a rather popular, though scandalous story called The Great God Pan? She ventured, desperate to keep their conversation going, by a fellow named Arthur Machen. His Pan is an actual blackguard. I'd rather hear the stories of her escape from the first and then the thistles, Wendy. Quiet, the less godly Pan ordered. Wendy turned, about to give him a piece of her mind, then saw the expression on his face. He was serious for once. Then the tips of his ears switched, like a dog's and a sheep or a cat's when it wasn't paying attention to you. Thorne frowned, also listening. I hear it too. Wendy, the only one without pixie hearing, turned her head and strained. After a few moments, she finally caught the faintest sound of twigs cracking and something crashing through the underbrush. She grabbed her dagger. It's the lost boys, Peter cried with delight. He leapt up, his cheeks glowing with rosy and excitement. They've come. Luna came crashing through the underbrush first, leaping exuberantly to Wendy. Good girl. How are you, girl? Wendy hugged the wolf, wondering who was going to get more dirt and mud on Womb. Now she could hear the lost boys approach. They were marching, singing some sort of military song, familiar in tune. The original lyrics replaced with something rude and unrepeatable. When they broke into a small clearing where Wendy, Thorne, and Tink and Peter waited, it was with glad eyes and weary triumph. They were all streaked with blood and makeup. Skipper, made for a particularly scary rodent she was, with dark blue and streaks above her eyes and on each cheekbone. Slightly's jacket was torn with unsettling dark brown splotches, and his arm was bandaged with a strip of leather over glaze. But he also had a necklace with the face of a hideous demon or god on it. The twins had new weapons to go with their slings, short, elaborately carved batons. Cubby and Toodles alone looked more or less the same, with just a few rips in their outfits and blue dots on their faces. Wendy made a mental note to ask them about their adventures later. When she tossed around blood and terrible wound in her stories, or say the idea of losing a hand in a battle, she hadn't really thought about it. She had basked in the praise when Michael and John said she could tell a good story, unlike most girls, one full of violence and victory. But now she was using the real thing and had experienced some fighting. She found her zeal for the most lurid somewhat tempered. She wondered about the strange rune on Slightly's arm. Well then, Slightly, Peter said, straightening himself up, regarding the other boy gravely. Well then, Peter, Slightly said, trying not to sound weary. The tension between the two of them was more palpable and uncomfortable than the humility in the jungle. Looks like you've had a bit of an adventure, Peter said. nodding at Slightly's arm. The caves are still inhabited, don't you know? You show 'em who's, though, right? Oh, we showed 'em all right. Slightly couldn't resist grinning. The whites of his teeth glistened like a real fox's. The smile was infectious. Peter smiled back proudly. I'm glad you made it, Slightly. I'm not in the top form at all. Things would be pretty grim without you all here to help me against the pirates, Peter admitted. Well, things would be pretty grim without you around ever again, Slightly said softly. Peter opened his mouth to say something, but then Toodles broke in excitedly. We fought and won, he cried, pushing his way into the middle of the two older boys. Peter grinned and swept in the air. Of course you did. You're the best fighters a captain could ever want. But he looked at Slightly as he said it. The fox boy smiled back. And with all the tension gone and everyone was talking and shouting excitedly about what happened, and where Peter's shadow was and what plan was next, Peter looked grim. Fact is, men, it could go down in time. Hook's got my shadow, and he's been holding it prisoner, torturing it. And when he does that, it hurts me. They're rounding the bloody neck, or a little while ago, and should be any moment. The plan is to get us, me first, then all of Neverland. We need to be ready. We need to come up with a plan, Wendy added. All right then, Peter said. All together now. Fairies, Lost Boys, Wendy, and me. Let's do this. Look, the pirates. Tinkerbell jingled nervously, and there it was, riding a fair wind from the west. The Jolly Roger swept into view, its ghastly flag, and Peter's shadow swapping in the breeze. And that's the end of that chapter. See you later.